Too. Yeah. Oh, I'm doing well. Yeah, I don't have any complaints. Although that seems to be a really standard answer these days.
Mhm.
How have you been since we last spoke to you?
Quite fine. I don't really know how it all came about, but it just felt like spending much less time online because I, yeah, noticed that it was kind of an addiction, or let's say when I woke up, I started to check my emails and spending too much time online. So I somehow felt like going outside more, although it's winter. And then I did some hikes to the coast, and I really enjoyed the sea and also, it's a season where you don't really meet anybody, and it's kind of it has its own magic somehow. So, um, that's what I was doing actually, like spending a lot of time outside.
Right. Yeah. So you were still in a good place. That was my what
Yeah,
what I wanted to hear. Yeah. Excellent.
yeah, there are some ups and downs and some days of getting lost in
Of
the
course. Of
fantasy
course.
land again, but yeah, sometimes it's more or less. But the strange thing is, I mean, I don't want to make a story out of it, but I feel it's deepening more, but also sometimes falling back more. So, like, yeah. But maybe that's a coincidence because it could be different as well.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
Mm.
Um, it is what it is. Uh, so that's the thing, isn't it? It's just that's what occurs.
Mm.
So when you say falling back, you could probably reframe that into saying, well, something new has shown up for me to look at. And
Yeah.
it presents itself as something old, but it's of course it can't be. It can only be what it is now.
Mm. Yeah, for example, I spent like over the winter holidays like 1 week with my family. And actually, it was the first Christmas that was like yeah, I really enjoyed it because this dynamics between my sister and my mom are not the same anymore. Or let's say, I don't really know what happened, but it feels like my sister um, is monitoring her own emotions more. So she's not like getting lost in the same mechanisms as before. And
Excellent.
I feel that yeah, there was like a time when it was already better, but then, oops, surprise, it happened again. And then there was a big fight, and I was in the middle of that, quite surprised about things happening so quickly. But now it really feels like it has stabilized because it could be that she gets a bit annoyed or triggered, but then in the next moment she gets calm again and tries to, yeah, harmonize the situation. And then it was actually the first Christmas that the three of us talked a bit about the death of my father being the traumatic moment from which on we actually never talked about how it had been for everybody, and that there was a distortion in our interaction, in, yeah, coming probably from that. And yeah, I really enjoyed that, but still, Mm, yeah, after 4 or 5 days, I noticed that there was a lot of reactivity towards my mom, and it had really to do with yeah, I really felt like super anti all the time. So I would really twist her words in her mouth, it just in order to create a conflict, in order to have some distance. But then I could really see that and tell her, like, after 2 or 3 minutes, sorry, please forget what I was saying. I'm just noticing that I need a bit of space for myself. So actually, I said that only in order to make you, yeah, to create a distance. And she also understood that. So
Oh, that's
I,
pretty good.
I, I really couldn't stop it. I could not do anything about it. It was really like saying something nasty, but thinking at the same moment, just shut up, but I couldn't.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I get that.
at
Yeah,
least afterwards, I could like tell her, please just forget what I was. I mean, I already told her before that that sometimes happens to me and that it's like rather a basic feeling that is there, that is a bit like, I'm annoyed by everything, and then it doesn't really matter what she says. I would just
yeah,
turn
yeah, yeah.
word around in her mouth. So,
Are you seeing these as opportunities to find what triggers you?
mm, yes, I mean, there was something very interesting which my sister said. I mean, it was basically an interpretation. And I Yeah, although of course it might be another story, but somehow I felt there was a bit of truth to it. And I mean, when our father got ill, um, we had just moved out of our parents' house. So that's somehow the point in our lives where we started to be independent from our
Yes.
parents.
Yeah, yeah,
Then this process was kind of distorted by, yeah, worrying all the time about our father. And then also, my mom would never give us all the information because she wanted to protect us, but we knew that it was not everything that fine, so that there was something in the background that she would not tell us. So I guess, yeah, what my sister did said that was that this process of um, starting your own life and having a bit more distance to your father's and mother's house was kind of distorted because then after our father's death, we were like caring a lot for our mother, and so yeah, I guess it's anyway. I mean, I noticed that. I mean, it's still like I'm 42, and it feels like whenever I take a big decision, I can't take it without speaking about it to my mom before. So. I guess that's kind of something that triggers me. So there is not, yeah, I don't know, maybe I would like to be more independent, but I feel a bit emotionally dependent.
do you recognize the implication of a morality when you use the word dependent?
Mm, morality, you mean like social norms or something? Or
Yeah, yeah, just that dependency has an implication of something not quite good.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Of course, it's all about cultural ideas about how
Yes,
close,
yeah,
not close you should be to your parents.
yep,
So,
yep,
yeah. And self-images, maybe like I'm a years old man, but I'm still asking my mom before I take a decision. I
right,
mean,
yes,
anyway,
yes. So the implication that you're still not mature enough, that
yeah,
you should be independent, that you should,
yeah,
yeah. All
yeah,
a lot of stuff in that one word, isn't there?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if we just describe what it actually is rather than what it means,
Hmm.
you would just be talking about a desire to share with your mother
Hmm.
things that have a certain level of importance.
Yeah, I now notice that it's not actually, I mean, I'm happy about the good relationship I have with my mom. I mean, I can talk about anything to her and she's interested in me. She's not the kind of parent who would have had ideas about how I should be or what I should become professionally or this kind of things. Maybe it's rather like sometimes I feel
Hmm.
that my mom is the only person I can turn to when I have like
Yep.
a decision going on or something. So maybe it feels a bit like being dependent because there are no other people. So, or maybe that's not even true. I don't know.
Hmm. I imagine that you would describe your relationship with your mother as a healthy relationship.
Mm, yeah, I mean, one thing that came up on Christmas, I mean, that was like rather from the perspective of my sister, was that uh yeah, my mom always thought that I was a child that she has to worry about especially. And I mean, it's still like when I, for example, go somewhere by plane, when I have to land, I always write to her that I landed safely because I know that she's worried. And I mean, I do that because it's not really a big thing. I can do that to make her feel better. But sometimes it's also a bit annoying because, yeah, I don't know.
Hmm.
Because, mm, yeah, I don't really find it so nice to feel that there is someone in the background always worrying about me.
Hmm. Have you imagined what it will be like when she dies?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, that's only my imagination.
Of course.
And I know that I will, I mean, when it comes, it will be like that, and then I'm going to manage it. But yeah, when I imagine it, it's like a total disaster. So that would mean that the only person that really knows me, or it feels like she really knows me, and that I can talk to her about everything and she will understand is gone. But I don't really know what that means.
Mm. Well, on the surface, it means you'll be alone.
Yeah, but I mean, it's something that I'm realizing anyway. I mean, it's a process of realizing that, mm, yeah, I mean, we already talked about us not understanding who we are anyway. So, why is it so important that other people understand me, you know? So, why does there have to be a person who seems to understand everything about me? I mean, that's an illusion anyway.
Mm. But there's something good about that, isn't there? There's something good that you've got that with your mother,
Yeah, of course.
and it feels, yeah. And one day you won't have it,
Hmm.
but because you don't know what that something good is, you won't know what you're gonna be missing. Maybe you'll only find out when you're missing it.
Mm-hmm.
What is that good thing? You know, it's definitely not a word called dependency.
Hmm.
But the intimacy, the closeness, the friendship that you have with your mother is pretty amazing stuff, isn't it? Not many people have that kind of thing in the world,
Hmm.
really. Yeah. And it's not to say that having it or not having it has got anything to do with needing it.
Hmm.
I mean, we don't need ice cream, but gee, it's nice when we get it.
Yeah. Um, Maybe it's a different subject, but I mean, I left Argentina 2 years ago. And there are some friends with whom I'm in contact, like, for example, my best friend.
Writing?
Um, no, we have video, uh,
Oh,
how do you call it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
video calls. Like, but of course, it's not the same as meeting in person,
Oh, no,
but
no.
um, so I don't really know because I had it was not my plan to go back to Argentina. But then I talked to a friend and it was like a very nice conversation. And it also had to do with her having lost her father recently. So it was quite emotional. And then I suddenly decided to tell her that I'm going to visit her. So I'm still waiting for my boss to give me the okay, but I guess that in the end of February, I will already fly over and spend 3 weeks there. And it just made me think about, I mean, there are, for example, people whom I didn't speak to for 2 years, but then I contacted them, and it doesn't really matter because they are still present. And it's not so much about having written to me or not, or other way around. Um, so, yeah, I mean, if you are spending time with someone every day, or you just communicate by having a call or a video call, or you don't speak at all. In the end, it's, or maybe a person is dead. Is there, it seems like there is not such a big difference. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of easy to recognize intellectually that connection with somebody is really about the internal processes that go on for each person. It's not
Hmm.
it's not about the other. It's about what they feel about the other that gives that feeling of connection and satisfaction and wonderfulness. Uh,
And another strange thing is that when I moved to Argentina, there were like two friends that in the beginning started to be like very intimate, but at some point the friendship didn't really evolve more, or there were even some irritations or things that I didn't like so much, or I felt treated a bit disrespectfully or something. And yeah, or it was like every time I tried to kind of reactivate the connection, then the other person said like, yeah, yeah, let's do that, but then it never happened. And like after five, six, seven times, I just thought,
you give
okay,
up. Yeah.
I like you, you're a nice person, but yeah, no. And when I did hiking on this island of the Azores, it kind of came up to me again, and then it felt like, okay, just yeah, I felt like, okay, that's over. It's we are not friends anymore, or something like that. But then it that just happened in my imagination, and like some weeks ago, like a big coincidence, those two friends contacted me again, and then I noticed, no, it's not true. I mean, the friendship is not over. It's just like I set them free to be who they are, and I'm not expecting things anymore. So that was kind of nice to see as well that
Yep.
even if this petty me decides like, no, we're not going to be friends anymore, that's not something to decide anyway. So,
It'll happen anyway. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Good one. Yeah. Yeah. If it's part of that, for me, it's part of that mystery of accepting that I can never understand. I can have stories, but to actually
mm,
know that they're accurate is it's
mm,
impossible, without speaking to them, and even speaking to them, what may be revealed, who knows? Yeah.
mm,
So the idea that we go, well, they don't want to be my friend anymore, um,
mm,
it, probably had nothing to do with the reality of it. Whatever it was, priorities change, and we our our desire for intimacy changes, and our
mhm,
level of contact changes all the time. For example, never keep in touch with people that have been in my life. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
mm,
So, like people I went to school with, I've got no contact at all with them.
Mm.
It's not there's not a romantic bone in my body about that stuff. But I've got friends that I haven't seen for 10 or 15 years, and when I
Mhm.
meet them, and it has happened, that it's like we were never apart. It's an instant take up of that.
Yeah, I had a conversation with my mom, for example, about friendships, and then she always wants to tell me, yes, but you have to cultivate your contacts and but I guess what she is talking about is like, I don't know, sending a postcard once in a while
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. The
remembering
Christmas
the
card every
birthday
year
or
or
something.
whatever. Yeah,
And then it's for me, like I always forget birthdays, but my friends luckily also always
yeah, yeah. They forget
forget my
yours. Yeah, yeah.
birthdays. So, and I don't really care about birthdays anyway. So, but then, yeah, I always told her like I don't really understand this idea of I have to cultivate my context. I mean, it's not something, yeah, it ha just happens or it doesn't.
That's
So,
right. Exactly. You could even go as far as to say, if you've got to cultivate them, then
mm,
there's something wrong. There's something missing. Yeah.
yeah, but then she sometimes has like those contacts that she complains about
Oh
the
yes.
over
Yeah.
years. But then it's always, yeah, but she invited me last time, so I have to invite her as
Yeah. Yeah.
well.
That's part of the cultivating, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once upon a time, it was mother's job to know everybody's birthday and to
Mm,
have something planned for every holiday and etc. It was a social duty that they had to do. And they made
mhm,
sure, and because how many Christmas cards turned up was very important. My
mm.
friend got 40 and I got 42, so I know, whatever. Yeah. We got four Christmas cards this year, and three of those four were from businesses that we had that had something to do with during the year, and one was from a friend. Yeah.
Mhm.
So are you looking at what what arises as where your focus is? So when you get triggered, after those 4 or 5 days with your mother or your sister, when you get triggered, are you totally involved in what's happened, or are you seeing what's in you that's behind you being triggered?
Mm, it has changed a bit because before I would have reacted and then afterwards felt like an awful person. And now I don't because I know it's just kind of a mechanism.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's good. So what I'm pointing out though, or what I'm getting presenting as a
mm,
possibility for you to look at, is
mhm,
that yes, you've got the tools that defuse the situation very quickly by seeing the bigger picture, right? So that's
mhm,
what I would call wisdom. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a step beyond that that is of value that you don't need to take, but it's there for you if you want, and that is to go, there is still something in me that
Mm-hmm.
reacts to certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than just be content, and that's fine if you are, I was for years, right up until I came across the fetters, I was quite happy about the fact that I erupted into anger. There was no suffering involved. It was a happening that finished usually within seconds, but nevertheless, it was just, so I coped with it. But then I got curious as to what's underneath that, what's behind
Mm-hmm.
that that means that it still happens. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I suspect that that's a bit the situation for you. You're getting triggered, but
Mm-hmm.
you've got the tools to, let's say, diffuse it fairly
Mm-hmm.
quickly and easily. So there's no suffering involved with it. I mean, well, I don't know that minimal, if any, suffering. Um, but there is that opportunity for you to look at what's still in you, and I'll almost bet that what you'll find is that it's a belief
Mm-hmm.
upon which a whole lot of other things still sit.
Mm-hmm.
So that underneath is the belief that probably supports a variety of triggers.
Mm. Yeah, there's a different thing, another thing that mm, sometimes I feel like falling back into it and then it gets a bit difficult. And that's, yeah, I guess when I came back from Argentina to Germany, there was a bit of a desire to get back to something that I already know, like something that seems familiar to me. And um, then it always happens that, for example, I go back to places where I have lived before, but it doesn't feel like home and I
Mm.
don't recognize it and it doesn't feel like something that's familiar. And yeah, and I think there has already happened this shift of like, I don't know how to call it, but there's something into the unknown. I don't know. There's something not known to me as it was in the life as I led it before for
Yep, yep,
most of
yeah.
the time. And yeah, maybe that's like uh there is still something that feels like very unsafe with that and that wants to go back to something that is
Okay,
familiar.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And maybe that's something that happens to me when I come back to my parents' house as well, that there is actually the fantasy like, ah, that's the place where I grew up, but then I come back there and it feels like uncomfortable even. And I don't know if that has to do with that for our family, that was like the pa place where the trauma happened. So I don't know. Maybe it has to do something with that, but I guess it wouldn't be so strong if there weren't this part of me that has the desire of going back to a safe place that feels familiar or something. So,
Mm. So would you say that lots of stuff or some other stuff or no other stuff gets measured by this degree of safety, or what's the opposite of safety for you? A degree of risk?
Mm, I don't know. I think it has two sides because on the other hand, yeah, there are many moments where like, I mean, that's just how I call it, like traveling into the unknown or something like
Mm,
this
mm.
feels good because it's not the repetition of always the same, as
Okay,
before.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it
Because
also feels a bit unsafe.
yeah, because I mean, I spent so many years in like cycles of the same negative thoughts and identifications and so on. And now this is kind of not nothing I would buy into anymore. But then what? Yeah, then there is something unknown or new, or I don't see any direction, or I don't, yeah. Or there is obviously still something that wants to see a direction or a goal or some place to go to or something like that. So maybe that's just like another habit or mechanism,
Well, that's
like
what we
being
that's
here.
what we left behind it to a degree, isn't
Yeah.
it? That
Mm,
needing to know, always having a end point in mind, etc. That's part of the
mm,
old social conditioning, isn't it?
mm,
Yeah. So I don't know how to describe, but this sense of going into the unknown, uh, definitely there's no fear involved for me. It's not a there's
mm,
no right. There is a level of excitement,
mm,
but probably not so much excitement as acceptance. It's,
mm,
yeah, but it definitely feels good for me. Not something that I'm scared
mm,
of. So I can't quite relate to that. I get it
mm,
intellectually, of course.
mm.
I can get that, but that
Yeah.
but what my
Mm,
question was, and what it seemed to me was that a lot of stuff in your life gets measured by this idea of how scary is it, or how is it, how unknown is it, or is what?
yeah. I just noticed, I mean, it is intellectual because it is thoughts. I mean, it's not, I mean, if I, hmm, it's a bit ambivalent because my intuition doesn't say that. It's just here. So,
So what does your intuition say?
my intuition is actually rather like this childlike, oh wow, what's going to come next? So,
Right. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, yeah. So there's we can look at it from a couple of different perspectives, and as I say, what you describe that you've done is that essentially you see that and you see that it's a story and you can dismiss it,
hmm,
so
yeah,
it doesn't have an effect, but it keeps on triggering. You have to keep going through that process
yeah.
because the basis of it still exists, what it rests
Mm,
on. And that's going to be probably a single belief
hmm,
in there that says something.
yeah, I guess it has something to do with being in control.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right, yeah.
It's kind of reminds me of my own experience in I and a perspective I go in and out of sometimes is what's happening. Like one perspective, the older perspective is like what's happening. It's happening um, where I'm the center of it. I'm the center of random happenings. So for me, I'm assigning meaning to what's happening around me. Like this is happening and it's affecting me. And then I have another newer perspective where I just see it as happenings. So even the unknown is seen as just happenings rather than happening to someone. And by seeing it that way, the the tendency to want to control isn't really there anymore. Does that make sense?
Mm, yeah, somehow I'm not so sure about yeah, because there are some periods when it seems so clear that there is not Lennart in control, but then sometimes after a while, feeling that obvious, it gets into oblivion again. So that's just something happening. So, but I think there were some moments when I thought, oh, I have to rethink it or something to in order to understand that again. And then I think, yeah, no, it doesn't really make any sense to try to get to this insight intellectually because that won't help anyway because there's no one to understand anyway.
So
Yeah, I
that,
think
that
it's just a movement in perspective. Like it switches on and off naturally. Yeah.
so
Sorry, mate.
Marius was talking about that no one to be there, being there to do that, but he was talking about it from a different thing. So rather than that as a, God forbid, a belief or as a knowing that there's no one there, what triggered me, what came up for me as he was talking was that when it changed from stuff happening to him to just stuff happening, it's kind of easy to see how all of those circumstances that are seemingly outside of us just appear for their own reasons. But the big jump then is that all of the stuff inside of us is also happening for its own reasons in the same way as the wind blows the tree and the tree moves. Right? Well, thoughts turn up and a reaction happens. Right? Whatever, exactly the same way as that objective thing. It's just, so it's not, there is no to anybody, it's not happening to anybody, but it's not happening by anything either. It's the result of a really complex arrangement of circumstances. And those circumstances extend all the way through us, inside us, into every crevice that we have, both physical and mental. And they're all still just happenings.
And the inside part is usually more sticky than the outside part.
Yeah. And so what if just to follow on with that a little bit, when we get triggered, there's there's going to be some of those seemingly objective conditions that, how can you put it, push our buttons. And so there's both the transmit and the receive side of that, you know. So there's something outside pushing our buttons, but our buttons are also inviting the pushing. They're as complicit in it as the thing that pushes the buttons. So in the essence of that is that again there's no separation. And, but what we are looking, so if we accept that all these things are just happenings, and they happen because of this seemingly coincidental arrangement of circumstances, then the idea that some of those circumstances are there, oh, they're, it's better if they weren't there, if they were different. I don't know how to put it. And they're the ones that we're looking to change so that we don't get triggered. But not that it's a big deal if we do and we accept them either. You know, that's it. Yeah. And that circumstance is almost certainly going to come back to a particular belief we have that is inaccurate.
I can't find it. Now there is a lot of anxiety and sadness. And 2 weeks ago, there was almost none of it. And the thoughts were the same, just there was no emotional reaction. And now there is.
And are you puzzled as to what is different? So on the
Yes.
surface, you're saying there's nothing different, but obviously something must be different. It's a story, it's a logical conclusion, but something is different for things to be different. But you don't recognize any particular event or happening that might have been a
It
major.
may be that a deadline is coming, but I have done my work. I even received the thanks for it. It's only polishing that's left.
Mm.
But it may be, but
Yeah, I remember
it's
that
just
that was a bit of a trigger for you, wasn't it? When you were told that you only had a short time to do that. Is that accurate?
yes.
But now that the pressure of all of that is gone, but you still feel this way.
Well, now I feel it more than when I was in the middle of the work.
So it's relatively easy to see that as a result of it, it wasn't the possible consequence of you not getting it done that caused that downward spiral. Because here you are, you've got it done and it's finished, and you're still in that spiral. Hopefully not much further down, but nevertheless. So it's even though that doesn't rule it out as a trigger, it just means that the trigger has not got to do with the story about the outcome or the possible outcome that you were worried about.
Could it be so simple as that you're still feeling this because you're trying to figure out why you're feeling it? That it's keeping it alive?
Then why did it disappear 2 weeks ago?
I didn't catch that it disappeared 2 weeks ago.
It disappeared. And then it
Well,
appeared again. There was no trembling, and now there is trembling.
And that ball in the stomach, is that there?
Hmm. It's not so much. No, it's just a slight tension right now. It's much milder than what it was in the beginning. No, it's manageable.
What's the first thing that comes to mind if I ask you, if you were that, whatever you want to call it, if you were that anxiety, what would you want to tell Bianca? What would you say to Bianca? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Would you just say it, or would you shout it out? Would you send a letter?
Would how?
Say that again.
Howl
How?
like a wolf, but a howl of pain.
Like you want to express that you are in pain.
That was the first thought. What would anxiety say?
So it's anxiety that is feeling the pain, and anxiety would be expressing that. If it had something, if it had a voice, it would be howling with pain. And when I asked what would anxiety say to Bianca, that howling is a message to Bianca.
No, I think there is despair in it. No one will
Yep.
help.
Okay. Yep.
Is Bianca identified with the anxiety?
In a way, it's a part of a committee.
Would you go? Would you go as far as to say that the pain is shouting out, the anxiety is shouting out about its pain, saying, "Stop it, Bianca! You're hurting me."
Yeah.
And if you were to ask it, "How am I hurting you?" What comes to mind?
For her, it's everything.
Everything, right? And I even got the feeling that you deserve it. I don't know if that's
No,
accurate. Eh?
no.
No. Okay. So if you're inflicting this pain for everything, would you say that it's not possible to change?
I imagine her as an infant. So infant in pain, everything is pain.
Yes, yes, yes. And it has no capacity to change or to get out of that or to do anything about it, eh? It's helpless.
Is there anything in your life circumstances that you've had to push through as of late? Like done something that you really don't want to do, but you pushed through it anyways?
Recently, no.
Can you see by the fact that it went away and then came back that while it wasn't there, did that show you that you have the capacity to not experience this? If whatever the circumstances were that might have done that, but it is a capacity that you have?
Yes, it is possible. Oh, well, it feels like sometimes it goes to sleep.
Do you think when it wasn't there, it was just asleep?
Yes.
Mm, okay, and it got woken up again.
Reminds me a little bit of times where I just woke up emotional with no apparent reason for it. And I remember used to like my old way of dealing with emotions was trying to understand um, why I was feeling that way. And when there wasn't any apparent reason, I was kind of stuck in like trying to find all these possible reasons. And so I spent days and days kind of, I was thinking that I was just, or a part of me was just thinking, okay, but I can't figure it out. So I'm just going to be with it and see what happens. But another part really wanted to understand, even though it wasn't really like in a conscious trying to figure it out. It still really wanted to understand why it was there. And in that, it was kind of rejecting it in a way, when really it just, it didn't want to be rejected. It wanted to be felt. It just wanted to move through. And it can't move through if part of me is just focusing on why it's there. So I don't know if that's the same thing, but it brought me there, brought me back to that. And I would add to that that I could definitely see myself, mm, like the nature of these meetings is to kind of bring up what's going on, bring up something that we could figure out together. And so bringing it up, like to have something to bring up, it's kind of also keeping it alive in a way. You know what I mean? I used to do that with, I used to facilitate men's circles before. And sometimes I would bring something with me that I could share, like instead of just sharing what's alive in the moment, I would come from the mind instead and like, here, let's talk about this, which is not the right way to go about it, or at least not what we encourage. But by doing that, I was bringing, or I was keeping an old issue alive because it's interesting.
I suspect that it may be very common that we keep an issue alive so that we can understand it. It voids a sense of satisfaction just to dismiss it, even if it's able to be simply dismissed. But it's like it's a hypnotic suggestion that we've had all of our lives that we have to understand everything. We have to understand what's going on.
Yes.
And so if we can't understand it, we're going to hang on to it until we can understand it.
And then
Because
what
if we,
happens to the things that
well,
isn't understandable, right?
yeah, that's right. And if we let it go before we understand it, we've lost our opportunity to understand it. Even if it's gone, and that was the point of understanding it, it's kind of a crazy one, isn't it? But I wonder if it's, sometimes it might be the case. I don't know. But your intuition will shout out to you, Bianca, if it is or if it isn't. Are you hanging on to this until you can understand it?
I think the question is rather, how do I live with it?
Oh, so the implication in that is that it will always be with you.
It was with me for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
How
But
probable it is that it will go away.
but then you had 10 minutes where it went to sleep.
Yes, it goes to sleep and then it comes back again. And the question is, how do I live with it? Do I let it express itself? Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. So maybe I calm it by sleeping and breath work and rocking. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't.
But how can I live with it? Suggests that there is no possible way to see the end of it.
Haven't found one yet.
Well, if you had, you wouldn't have it, would you? Hmm. Maybe you would. I don't know. Yeah.
That is sounds like the perfect um, circumstance to form a strong belief that you haven't found one in that amount of time. So there's a belief forming that it won't ever go away, keeping it alive, possibly.
So if it were to disappear one day or go to sleep apparently permanently, you would be a different person, wouldn't you?
Was I a very different person 2 weeks ago?
Were you?
I
When
don't think so.
no, when it was asleep, you weren't different. Okay.
My sense of time is practically gone, but I do remember, I feel like it was about 2 weeks ago where you were laughing and smiling a lot more.
Yes, but uh, I wouldn't say it makes me a different person when I'm laughing more.
maybe a different person is too strong, but perhaps a person with a different perspective.
It's just a different mood.
Yeah, I was just getting at that, at least in my experience, if I'm happy and smiling, I tend to have a more broad, open perspective. Or if I'm not, if I'm feeling anxious, then my perspective is more limited, more focused on what I'm experiencing.
Does that anxiety keep your focus
Well,
smaller?
I don't understand. When your perspective is more open, you are focused on what you are not experiencing.
How do I say that? Yeah, just more open, more receptive rather than, yeah, it feels more limited, like contracted, maybe is a better word when anxious. I have to admit that I haven't felt anxiety in a long time. So it's I'm going back to memory now.
Are you on medication for anxiety?
Yes.
And did they change? Do I have a memory that changed a month or two ago?
Mm, I've started it about 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago.
Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that's not a long time. I mean, you could easily say these things can take 3 weeks to normalise. 6 weeks is, yeah. And I suspect that most of those, I don't know about the particular ones that you're on, but I suspect that most of those work by regulating the amount of dopamine in the body.
Serotonin.
Serotonin, right. Okay. Yeah. So do you feel that they're working okay?
Yes. It may be that the organism is getting used to it.
Hmm.
And so when it was not used, there was less anxiety, and now it's going back to normal level.
Reverting, yeah, yeah. So one of your earlier questions was, how do I live with it? Do you have a choice about that?
Mm.
I mean, I get what you're asking, but I just wondered, let's investigate that a little bit.
Well, from what I see, there are two main roads. Either calming it down or letting it express and come up and process. I mean, believe if it's a trauma.
Mm, mm. I mean, this when you put those two possibilities, the second one seemed initially a lot more attractive to me. That was good. Let's allow it to express, see
Yeah.
what comes up, and work through it. But it may well be too, if the intensity of it is high, that calming it down is a good first step before letting it express. So maybe a combination of both are valuable. So when you say calming it down, you mean by breathing, doing some breath work, or meditating, or doing some yoga, or taking a Valium, or
And I know you prefer the second way because you were. Oh, I don't like that you are rocking.
I don't mind you rocking. Yeah, I don't like it.
I remember it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it triggers for me a whole lot of uncomfortable things, I guess. Yeah. Send me back to my childhood when I rocked. So with the second one, allowing it to express itself in order to see what's pushing it, is there a degree of sophistication about that? Is it able to be controlled so that we can only let as much out as is appropriate and still see what's behind it? Well, I mean, do we lose control completely and just let it erupt?
Well, my therapist now specializes in trauma. So we are, well, right now she is gathering the information about what it can be. There were some events in my infancy that can be about it. And she has some techniques to work through it.
To investigate that, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like the fact that you're working on it. I like the fact that something's happening. There is some movement at the station. Yes, good. And you rock all
No,
you like.
it's like with this learning to ride the bicycle. I want to do it in a safe way.
There,
No falling off the bicycle included.
no skinned knees on the way. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. And you feel safe with your therapist?
Mm. Yes.
Yeah, good, good. I mean, that's important. If you didn't feel safe, I would say find another therapist. But feeling safe is really important. Yeah. Mm. How's things been for you, Maya?
Fine. Thanks. Nothing special. Just going about my day, and all the time I'm gathering crumbles from somewhere, different things. Like thinking about I have to go to work this week again. I'm flying today, and it doesn't feel good. And then I just observe it. I will go anyway. Then thinking about how um, I will have to, in the next month, I will have to work with a group of people. And there are some aspects of it I don't like. And then I think, I will have to do this. But then I see, oh, I'll be judging. I'll be judging a lot. Oh, what a good opportunity to watch me judge and to go further. What am I judging? Who am I judging? What's in me? What is mine in what I judge? So just small things picking up around. And I'm still um, invested in looking at how sensations and thoughts are or aren't connected. I find it interesting. It's not entirely clear for me, so I stay here.
Yeah.
And thinking, planning. When I dropped in, I didn't know what was everything about now, but I dropped in when Marius said about something about us coming into meetings and thinking about things that we are going to discuss. And this is also one little point I saw among other thoughts. There are always thoughts about what am I going to say in the meeting. And I thought, is it good for me to think? Because it's thinking, it's preparing, it's something. Sometimes I say something I prepared, but sometimes I just latch on something that someone said and something that's going on in the meeting. But somehow, I don't know. If I really adopt the position that we are we are having thoughts that are given to us at some point, then it is also okay to talk about things that we prepared. And otherwise, if I'm not talking about things that happened to me during the previous days, then I'm not giving the group the opportunity to catch something that would be important for me to go further. So, and also still playing with this thing that things are random and things occur as they are given to us to occur.
Yes. Yeah. So have you thought about one in the middle of that? One in between? I mean, what I say is we do not have free will, but neither do we live in a deterministic environment.
Because it's somehow conditioned. Yes.
Yes,
This
so
also. Yeah.
but everything that depends on conditions, every one of those conditions also depend on conditions.
Before. Yeah.
And there's no end to that. There's no end. Every
Yeah.
single thing has so many different conditions required. And when they happen, and then you realize that every single one of those conditions was also based on conditions. And every one of those conditions was, and there is no end to it. It never stops.
Yes, I'm
So,
also observing that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And somehow I tend to relate that to movement, but movement not in a traditional sense, not in that there is movement from one position to the next, one place to the next, one time to the next, not any of that kind of movement, but that movement that it gets really hard to make sense of it, but that movement that never goes anywhere, never takes time, but still is movement. And I just become a mumbling mess trying to explain that one. Yeah. It's like there
Well,
is
I
no
like to just,
continuity. Hey, sorry.
I was just going to say, I like to just conclude that there's no possible way of us knowing how that works.
Yeah.
I wanted to say I see no connection. I
Well,
don't know.
there isn't any connection. No, there is nowhere there is any connection. I know that maybe not how you meant it as such, but so because everything. So let's forget. Let's go back a step or two. Everything is always in flux. So let's not worry about what the flux is. Just the fact that everything is always coming and going, moving more or less up or down, in or out, whatever, back and forward, you name it. There's always that constant movement of everything. Because the moment if we could freeze everything and there was no movement, nothing would exist. That would be the end of everything. So it's really it's like magnetism. It's the conditions that produce magnetism are a bit. Well, we know how to make a magnet, um, but we don't know what it is we've made. With this invisible thing that has a push and a pull and an effect and so on, and that's us as well. We also have that constant. Now I've forgotten where we started with that one. Mm.
Me neither. But there is one other thing that I was reminded of when you said movement. It's easier when I relax into this perspective of just watching things unfolding, like brushing my teeth, and then I'm able to watch the movements and not identifying with my body doing it. When I do such things, observing myself or observing others, then it is much easier to do when something is moving. When the scene is static, I am not able to do this because there's nothing to observe, actually. or it seems that there's nothing to observe.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
You could observe what's going on inside.
Yeah.
Or apparent inside.
Oh, there's a rich world inside me. Always something going on. Mind chattering, hearing things.
What makes it inside rather than outside? How do you know that?
Well, thoughts appear inside me.
Really?
And for some, yeah, they're not outside. Except when I speak. uh, and I have some, I would say, I'll stupidly say some like 10% of insight into that everything is going on inside me because all perception and all thoughts and perception and everything has to be processed inside my mind. So, but like I said, like some 10% still of insights, the rest still in concepts. But I do see it somehow that the world is constructed inside of me. Must be reconstructed in my head. It is outside, I perceive it, but I perceive just electrical impulses in my brain. And from these impulses I have to reconstruct what the world represents for me, not what the world is, but what the world represents for me. So it's all in my head, yes. Completely in my head.
So is there a world that actually is that's different to the world that you construct in your head, in your experience?
In my experience, is there a world? Well, I still mostly believe it, yes. But as I say, I still mostly believe it. So I don't know what this means. It's a belief that the world exists. Is it a belief?
So how would that be different if I said to you, it appears to exist, it doesn't actually exist, and the appearance of it existing is useful?
It is sitting well with me. This is just what I was saying right now. That it appears to exist with me, for me, and it is useful, of course. I'm watching at stairs now, for example. It is very useful to think that the stairs exist and to raise my leg when I go that way.
How about the does the place where those stairs seemingly lead, does that exist? That is not in your experience currently?
Say again?
Where those stairs lead, that
Yeah.
you can see the stairs in your experience, the apparent place those stairs lead that you cannot see in your experience right now, does that exist?
I know it's a story now. It doesn't exist at the moment. I know it's a story. I see it as a thought. And then we come to an interesting point, which is, do I know this now because I read and thought a lot about that, or am I really experiencing it as, oh, well, myself sabotaging myself? But it's a story. It doesn't exist in my experience now. I don't see it. I don't perceive it. There's nothing to perceive from the upstairs.
That's not a belief, is it? That's an experience.
Yes, that is an experience. Yeah, exactly. Just what is here, what I can see, what I can hear is perception.
The only reality is what you can experience right now in your direct experience.
It's actually completely clear to me. I just don't believe it, which is a belief or non-belief. Also a belief, right?
Or disbelief, yeah.
Yeah, but it's the same thing.
Mhm.
Believing, not believing. Wait a second now. I'm not allowed to think now. There is a confusion in my head. Suddenly there's a confusion. But if I
So
stay with it,
it's,
yeah,
is the word confusion that presumably has something to do with fusion. So it should be unfusion, not confusion. But what is that confusion saying to you? What are the two sides, if there are two sides to it?
don't engage with these thoughts now. Don't engage with this content now. But I would like to.
So what Marius said, you experience the sight of the stairs now, but you don't experience the sight of what's at the top of the stairs. So what's at the top of the stairs exists only for you as a thought, as a concept at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So it exists as a thought story.
Yes,
Aren't you experiencing that?
I am. It's completely clear to me that it's a story. The landing in the rooms. But there's a doubt now, like, okay, I know it's just a thought, and now what? It doesn't change anything.
No.
It doesn't change me how I feel. It doesn't change me it doesn't change the perspective. It's not it. It doesn't matter. I know, I've known it for a long time that what is not directly present, what is not directly here is just a thought. I've known it for a long time before I came here.
Pretty obvious the moment you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what? One of the things more than one of the things, but anyway, one of the things that happens here that we're doing, if we step back and try and describe it a little bit, is that we're arriving at an appreciation for what is actual and recognizing, right, even what half of America is doing at the moment is that they've taken a belief and they've called it a fact. And any facts have to synchronize with their belief. Otherwise, it's an alternative fact, as they say, which is a weird oxymoron. But essentially, and so but society has done this and been doing this for a long time. We've taken things like the word reputation and we're prepared to kill to protect it. Crazy stuff, where concept has overruled what is actual. And that's really the bottom line to what we're doing here. And there's this weird side effect that says, yes.
I'm sorry, but for me, with the dusk so it affects my mood when I think about this here, only this, but it's real or actual. How awful, off.
Mm.
So much anger. That's right.
Mm.
But it is.
Yeah, I get that. I get that you feel that way. I'd love to see what provokes such a hard judgment.
I wonder what evokes appreciation. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Mm.
Why would anyone appreciate it? Off.
Just wanted to point out what I appreciate about the point that we were just making is when we recognize that what is in our direct experience is what is actual, for lack of a better word. We can also recognize that believing that there is something permanent out there, which I've touched on before, something permanent and separate from us, actually sets up a belief of separation because it assumes that I am here and there's something else permanent outside there.
There is only here.
Yes.
And
And
it's
so if we,
awful.
yeah, for me, when that belief dropped, my experience, if I have to try to describe it in concepts, felt more inclusive or more or less separate, more everything is me rather than me against the world.
I had a short moment yesterday when I was able to jump on something that showed me this separation, but it was so short, and I don't remember what it was exactly. So I had this glimpse into this separation and not separation. This was the first time for me. But then it went away. I can't remember what it was. It was, I took to listen something Pernille Wortfetter because Scott was mentioning that there was something interesting in it. And I thought, oh, it would be interesting to listen to it again. But I didn't remember what it was, what was interesting for Scott and what I thought was interesting in it. But I took to listen this lesson again. And then I found something in it. Whether it was what Scott was talking about or not, it's not important anymore. And then it was about what wants, what fetter, what we want. And then I took something that's important to me, how I look something. And then I would like to have straight teeth. And then the whole levels of the story deeper and deeper. It's not about how I look, it's about how I think that other people perceive me. Because I don't see myself, I don't see my teeth. Are they straight or not? They're functional and healthy. It's about how I look, it's about the shame I feel about myself. I'm ashamed of myself. I don't smile because of it. And it went deeper and deeper somehow, and I'm not able to reconstruct it anymore, how it was. But it came to this that if I wasn't so ashamed, a bit Baron Katie as a side dish, yeah. Who would I be? Something like, then I don't remember anything. But it was interesting. It took me pretty deep. It took me deep, and it ended up with, oh, there's no boundary between me and what's around, between me and other people, but not for long.
Yeah, don't try and find it again. Don't try and pull it back. Just look
No,
forward to the next time, the new one that comes along.
no.
These moments are not arrived at by the mind. So when that happens,
Mm,
it will just be, it'll kind of hit you. Uh,
mm. Yeah, I'll
and
let
it's
this one go.
impossible for the mind to make any sense of it. You can't describe it. You can't explain it. It's just,
Mm,
you can say, oh, it feels a bit like this or it feels a bit like that, but that's about as close as you can get, and it's not very close. But yeah.
mm.
I can't remember what I wanted to say now, but maybe it will come up. You said something about what something about the connection between sensation and thoughts not being clear, or do I remember that
Yeah,
correctly?
I'm beginning to figure this one out. Uh, I said last time we were driving and I had a thought and I had a sensation connected with it, apparently connected. But then I was able to replace the sensation and the meaning of the thought for another, just
Mm.
just for play, just for fun. And then it was clear to me really they are not connected. I can have there can be a thought, but I can assign one or other meaning to it. So, but it's not completely clear to me. It's coming up. It's coming up.
Yeah, now I actually remember what I wanted to point
Mhm.
out or ask, um, rather. Can you see, have you ever experienced having experiencing a sensation, maybe an uncomfortable sensation, and there's a movement of the mind in trying to understand why you're feeling uncomfortable, that you're in trying to give it a meaning to understanding, you're actually constructing a story to explain it.
I think so.
I just mentioned that,
I think,
so nothing you have to kind of answer now, but it might pop up when you're having some kind of uncomfortable feeling
mm,
to kind of observe what is happening.
yeah. You mean you mean like having there are no unpleasant sensations clear to me now. There are sensations. Unpleasant is what how we interpret them. This is
Yes,
unpleasant.
yes, that is correct.
But yeah, but do you mean like soothing myself when there is something unpleasant or a s constructing a story into to soothe
Well,
myself or some other way?
well, you could say that. I've noticed a movement, well, first of all, in myself, but I've heard other people explain the same thing, that if they experience a sensation that they label as unpleasant, but there's no apparent reason, there's no obvious reason in their current experience to explain that unpleasant sensation, then because it's unpleasant, they don't want it there. So they want to find out, why am I feeling this way? What's this about? And then a lot of the times we in trying to figure out what's going on, we construct a story that is a possible explanation of that sensation, which is just a story that we're actually
I can
making after the fact.
I can name you one right away. This is this unpleasant feeling for having to fly today, having to travel today.
Yeah,
I there is some sensation, there is some like slight anxiety, like feeling,
yeah.
and I woke up with it. I didn't think about it, but then I came and I say I have I don't feel well because I have to travel today, and it's
Yeah.
just a story I made up. I just
And by
yeah.
doing so, you're kind of like, there is a choice there, right? You can do that, what you just did, which is very natural, I think, for many of us. Or you could just recognize that it's sensations and just be with it without the story, which often just maybe not dissolves it completely, but changes it a lot of the times. But when we assign a story to it like we do, um, we keep it alive.
I remember playing with this once. I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't sleep. There was some sensation. And I deliberately decided not to label it, just to stay with it. Because it was such a, it must have been very quick thinking, because it's easy to label. It's easy to label. And then I just stayed with it. And I thought, I don't want to label it, because if I label it, then I will start to spin stories around it. And then I won't be able to fall back asleep. But I stayed with it, and of course, it's changed because things changed just a bit, but it didn't go away. It didn't morph into something else. No, it stayed this way. I fell asleep, but it lasted. It lasted. It wasn't a quick fix for my problem.
It's not meant to be a quick fix, but it takes as long as it takes. But my point is just being that by spinning a story around it, it will likely hang around for a lot longer and
Yeah,
maybe also intensify.
yeah, maybe. But it stayed as it was. And I never knew what it exactly was, why it was. Because I decided not to, just to observe the sensation and not to, yeah. It happened many weeks ago now. I just forgot about
I've had this question a lot, Vince, in like regards to what we're doing here. Like, I've often wondered if we're doing exactly what I said we're my point was there. A lot of the times when we're trying to figure out the sensations here. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just, in my experience, have wondered if that's necessary. If it's uh, at least most of the time I feel like just being with the emotion um, I don't want to say it's the right thing to do, but works well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Being with it, and I guess we talk about how we're with it, how we're being with it. So if we're being with it non-judgmentally, being with it, right, what just a witnessing role, if you like. But see, even that corrupts things. So however so the way I see it, so just going back a little bit to what you were talking about with Maya, just that. So if sure, if we construct a story around what's happening, particularly if it's an unpleasant something, if all sorts of ramifications can come from that story, depending on and how well we construct the story, and by that I mean how objectively we can describe what's going on. rather than attribute meaning to it. So if we have a story that is a descriptive story, that's going to have a certain effect. Whereas if we have a story that has a meaning associated with it, well, then we're off in fantasy land again, aren't we? But even more subtle than that, you know. So even if we're going to produce a pure description as a story, what's the purpose of doing that? Are we doing that in order to fix it, in order to change it, with an intention, with the idea of control? All that stuff comes alive. So the motivation for the story is more important than the story itself, in that sense. So, yeah, see, when we say words like what we're doing here, it implies an intention. And of course, there is some kind of intention that may have never been specified and turned into a contract or anything.
That's a good point, because exactly what you're pointing at there, in an ideal situation or an ideal world, we could start every investigation by saying exactly what you said there first, like laying the groundwork of this not having, or what kind of intention it does have. But I think when we don't address that, we kind of bring our own unconscious, perhaps, intention, or not unconscious. And so there is a big risk of approaching it with the mindset of fixing it.
Mm.
But of course, to describe or to kind of lay down that groundwork every meeting, every time we're trying to dissect what's happening, it's too complicated.
Well, it's a good thing that because there's a few people here, you know, there's bouncing off. Everybody bounces off everybody else. So what somebody says gets some thoughts going or some reaction happening here, and then that gets expressed, and that produces other stuff. And so there is that constant state of discovery that's going on. And maybe we could be more intentional in directing it. But yeah, I'm lazy. I don't like to have a plan and do all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe it would feel unnatural as well. It's just an observation,
Mm.
or something I thought about the other day.
Oh, it's a legitimate one, definitely legitimate. You know, we've got to be careful not to get into philosophy and just start operating in the land of stories, for sure. Yeah.
At least have
But I think
awareness of the risk of that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
having the awareness is the best, because anything else, like a long half an hour disclaimer at the beginning or something, it would set a path for a ritual. Like
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
this would be bad. This would be bad.
Yeah.
And me saying bad, it's judging. It's judging things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happens. Yeah. This mind is kind of running around in a bit of a whirlwind up there, and I'm really wanting to um it's really weird, you know. I'm really wanting Maya to understand how she turns those stairs into something solid to step on as she's walking up them.
Yeah.
I would like to. That's why I'm sitting here and watching the stairs. I'm staring at the stairs, but nothing changed.
That is something I would be interested in hearing as well, Vince, if you want to go into that.
I don't know that I can do that. It was just a desire, yeah. But I can approach it a little bit, yeah, because I did have this kind of movie running in my head that my daughter's just had, no, well, I'd say just had, it was a few months ago actually. She had a, a her the floor in her house got redone, and she put real timber down, and it's absolutely beautiful. It is really something to behold. You know, it's hardwood and the way it's been made, but the grain of it. They've taken great care to have all the grain so that it flows nicely and everything. But when you go down the stairs to downstairs, the grain runs the length of this of each step. It goes across the step. And the colours of the grain mean that it's really hard to see where that step ends and the next step starts. And so I notice when I go down, and sometimes I go down with the light on and sometimes I go down with the light off. And when I go down with the light off in particular, I'm never sure whether I'm on the last step or there's another step to go down, because I haven't done anything about counting the steps or anything. But there's that really weird sensation when you put your foot down and you expect there to be a step there and there's not, or you don't expect to be a step and there is. You know, you get that it really throws you off, and you get that really weird physical sensation of whoa, I better hang on to something here or I'm going to fall over. It's a weird one, yeah. Well, you can see when you look at your stairs, and you can pay great homage to the mind, that it's worked out exactly the height of those stairs and how far apart they are. And so when you walk up it, it directs your feet to step in the right place and put the right amount of effort to push you up to the next step and do all of that stuff. And it's absolutely critical that your mind was able to do that. You can imagine somebody who starts seeing the world in two dimension and the trouble they might have with the stairs. Or you can imagine someone that hasn't kind of got that depth perception that you've got, or that doesn't think in the same way that you think. And the only way they can go up the stairs is to hang onto the rail or touch the wall or whatever, you know. So there's all of these abilities that you seem to have that you don't even notice, you take for granted, all relate back to the mind. So although you may not see how you make the stairs into something solid, you can see how the mind places them in such a way that they're useful for you. How it knows how far apart they are and how tall they are and whereabouts you can put your foot on them and so on. Going back a lot of years, when I woke up, there was a couple of days that are all very vague to me now, but there was some psychedelic experiences there as I walked along the sidewalk, and in this case it was a concrete sidewalk set into a turf, in the middle of a turf area. I don't know what you would call it in other countries, but we call it a footpath that I was walking on. But my wife, who comes from Victoria, calls it a, oh, I forget now, not a footpath. nature strip. She calls it a nature strip, and it's got a strip of concrete down the middle of the nature strip, and that's what we call the footpath. But anyway, but I have the distinct memory of walking along that, and the ground came up to meet my feet with every step. There was a collaboration between my feet and the ground with walking. I didn't feel like I was going to fall over, but it was a really unusual experience of the ground moving up to meet my foot as I was putting my foot down. And it's easy to dismiss it as just a psychedelic experience. Or should I ask, did it actually happen? Was the ground actually moving up to meet my feet? Well, logically, I would say no, it wasn't the case. But that was my experience.
It's kind of similar to how I used to see or experience my car driving forward, but now it seems more like I'm sitting still in the car and, and the world is coming towards me. It's kind of similar to that, I feel.
Mm.
That has changed. Like that is it seems like a perspective that's here to stay.
But we can take some of those and say, that's not what most people experience. Therefore, it's an aberration, and build a story around why it is what it is, and make it seem like it was just a trick of the mind. But the reality was it was an actual experience. It is an actual experience for you when that happens. And there's nothing to say that's more right or less right than any other experience that anybody has. They're all just experiences.
Yeah, I would even say both perceptions are a trick of the mind.
Perceptions are a trick of the mind. Yes, I would go that far.
Yeah.
But not even, yeah, so, well, all right, I was going to say not even perceptions, but I guess it is the mind that does all perceiving, even if we're not aware of it. It's, or it's the brain that does all perceiving. So the mind's only one department of the brain, eh? Is that what do we say that? That
I don't I don't say that. I don't say anything about that because brain and mind is
yeah,
yeah,
maybe mind is just the HR department of the brain.
maybe.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So the mind has been the boogeyman in a way. The mind is what causes all the suffering. The mind is what's led us astray. And then all of a sudden we get back to the mind is actually what creates the world that we move on, that we know, that we live in, that we interact with.
It's the conditioning that created the suffering. It's not the mind.
Yeah, okay.
You can recondition the mind or it can
Yeah, yeah,
recondition
yeah.
itself.
Yeah, that's a good separation actually. I hadn't thought about that one before. But yeah, so the mind is just going to be an expression of that conditioning. It was involved, I think, all the way. Maybe not all the way, but yeah. A lot of that conditioning happened via the mind.
Yeah, I just see the mind as kind of like, at least in regards to what we're talking about now, as kind of this the storage. for the conditioning.
Mm.
So you could either store the suffering kind of conditioning or
Yeah,
another
whatever.
kind.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting too. Yeah. Mm.
Sorry, Leonard. Leonard, can I ask? In German, there's no word for mind. There's only Geist.
Yeah, it might be translated as Geist. Yeah, but that can mean a lot of things. So that could be
Yeah,
ghost or
spirit,
spirit or yeah.
but no
Sometimes
mind.
mind is also translated as Verstand. It's from verstehen to understand. It's like yeah, something more rational.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But no mind in this sense, mind.
Mm,
Like this that is related to the brain, but it's not material or something. It's activity of the brain or something
mm.
specific.
Yeah, that would be Geist, I guess. Yeah.
Geist would be spirit, as in poltergeist.
Yeah, it could also be like a ghost. Yeah, Geist, ghost. It's I think well,
Uh,
both are Germanic languages, English
Or
and
ghost, spirit, and spirit meaning more something ethereal, or but also nature or tone.
yeah. For example, we say somebody is ein großer Geist, like a big spirit, a genius or something. It could also be genius. Um, But Geist also could mean an alcoholic beverage. Like it
Well, it's
could be
spirit
any.
again, spirits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
but I find it interesting. There is no word for mind because there's no mind.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting what Marius said about the mind, and I've always thought of the mind as like the railway station. The mind is the railway station, and thoughts are the trains. So it's like a managerial or a whatever. But I mean, the mind is just a collective word for thoughts. Maybe that's probably more how I've seen it.
I was just checking the etymology of the English word mind, and it's like in Old English, it meant memory.
Okay.
That could be understood as conditioning, couldn't it?
Yeah, that opens up a whole lot of things. Memories, I like that. Yeah. And memory leads into a library.
Also connects with what we were talking about in a previous meeting, that we're actually only experiencing the knowing of memory, or like, yeah,
Mm.
that, yeah, it's all a construct.
Isn't it also like when you say mind your step, it's like remember or pay attention to?
Yeah. What about when you say, I don't mind? I mean, though I'm saying that means I don't give it any importance. I mean, they're connected, aren't they? But it gets a bit loose, that connection.
Yeah, but it shows that the
Oh,
concept of mind is very blurry, actually.
Yeah.
and in Sanskrit, mindfulness, sati, means memory.
Right. Remember to be present.
Reminds of Uspensky, remembering oneself.
You just said it reminds me. So,
Good one. Remind. Yes, let's do mind again. Yeah. Okay.
And you know, Vince, my question was a serious one. I I wonder how this judgment of appreciation comes about.
Right. Uh, I don't experience it as a judgment. My Probably the word I would use that expresses appreciation is awe, AWE, and that is a description of an experience.
A reaction to something
Yeah,
based on your conditioning.
yeah. But
Well,
the
I
same question
feel
back for
it's
you.
the same with anger. It's just a reaction.
Sure. Yeah, true. But I want to ask you the converse of the question you asked me is what makes you think that it's so awful?
You said it's all awful.
Awful. Oh, so you meant that literally awful,
You
full of awe.
know that awe means both wonderment and terror.
Right. Oh, okay. I only see it as wonderment. Right. Okay. I wasn't seeing the terror side of it. Yeah.
That's where the word awful comes from.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I get that.
It's
Yeah.
full of terror.
Mhm. I don't experience any terror, but you do, eh? Yeah. Yep. And we even say things are terribly good. That's not how you were meaning it. I was just playing with that again. So, yes. So my answer for me is that appreciation is experienced, and the answer for you is that terror is experienced. Neither of us are talking about anything objective, are we? We're both talking about our experience.
isn't it just the meaning, either consciously or subconsciously, we're assigning to whatever is? And that is also just conditioning. And when we recognize that it's just conditioning, perhaps we can be open for reconditioning or not.
So I like my experience, and I wouldn't want Bianca's experience. And I don't want her to have that experience either. I want to give her my experience. It just seems so much more pleasant. But you're right. There's no difference between any of them from one perspective, and that perspective is that it is what it is. So whether it's terrible or good is the description that we overlay on it, and somewhere in there, whether after that description or before that description, comes an experience that I might call pleasant or unpleasant.
So then there is the tendency, at least in my experience, to be more open to new possibilities of seeing things if I experience something as unpleasant. Like I'm more prone to
Look
want
for an
to
alternative.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Bianca will say this to us. Tell me if I'm wrong, Bianca. She'll say, "What's wrong with me feeling this?"
And that would be her prerogative to say that, like, and to feel that. And that is what I guess decides whether one is open to change or not.
I
Because
don't
if it does,
feel I
yeah.
don't feel like I have a choice.
Can you live with, "I don't have a choice, but still things could change"?
Yes, that's how I live.
But you say that, and then what comes up here is a question of, does your mind have a tendency then to go to investigate possible alternatives, or to
Yes,
say that this is what it is? Okay.
my mind loves exploring alternatives and different perspectives.
Yeah, so then at least you're open and receptive to an alternative, which is great. And you're right that you can't really control if that
But you
happens or
know,
not.
it's different looking at perspectives, different perspectives as a thought experiment. But when I take this perspective of let's say, appreciating, and there comes an emotional response. Yeah, like, not true. You're lying. And with this, I have no choice. I can't change it.
How about trying not to have a perspective?
Can't imagine it.
Or maybe it would be more accurate to say not to have an interpretation.
So the difference between my experience of appreciation and you trying to use that as a way to change things is that I'm not trying to convince myself of something. I'm not trying to adopt a belief for the sake of an outcome. So when you say, "Oh, I'll see if appreciation can change this for me," that's what you are doing, it seems. And of course, your mind is going to say, "I don't believe you. You don't really have appreciation. So how can it have an effect if it's not real?" Yeah. And it may even be impossible for you to imagine that you could have appreciation for these things that you see.
If it would happen, it would happen.
Yeah.
But it doesn't.
It hasn't yet. Yeah.
This kind of brings me again to a question that I've often played around with is um, what happens here a lot of the times when there is a story or an interpretation of what's happening. I see that I often just, like you said to Lennart, diffuse it or see it as a story and it kind of loses its meaning. And then you pointed out that, and then it might or probably will come up the next time again because you just diffused it. You haven't really dealt with the underlying reason for that particular story to come up. And I wondered if how this actually works, like in the if we're kind of trying to understand reconditioning again. Is it a matter of just recognizing as a story and then dropping it over and over again? Or is it assigning a new or suggesting a new meaning, a new line of programming? I don't know the answer to that.
Hmm. I was thinking that stories change when we discover something about the old story. So a good koan is this. If I have a belief and then I don't have that belief, have I got a replacement belief? Or an alternative way to put that might be, is it possible to drop a belief and not replace it with another one?
It's kind of, you just boiled down what my point to a koan. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I thought about, well, in past I believed in God, but then when I left church, it wasn't that I believe there is no God. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but it is irrelevant to me. So it is a way of not having any belief because it's irrelevant.
Yep, I get that. That makes sense. I mean, I was trying to fabricate a belief that referred to your new situation where the whole thing is irrelevant, and I couldn't come up with a belief. Right? You could stretch things, and you could say, oh well, there is a belief there that it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. But that's probably stretching things a little bit. It's not like you have a belief about God or not God. Yeah.
But this is kind of what I think I believe if I have to be honest, that by recognizing it as just a story over and over again, it will lose its meaning.
Yeah. I can go along with that one. I mean, my understanding of the second set of doubt stuff is that there's no way you're ever going to fix that. There's no way that doubt can be eradicated by counter doubt, whatever that is. And that doubt only ever gets fixed by just becoming bored with it, and it's irrelevant. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on some level, I can see that it's just, this reality or actuality doesn't care what I think about it. If I appreciate it or if I say it's awful, it doesn't care at all. But on another level, this anger just rises, and what can I do?
Yeah. Yep. If it gets unpleasant enough, it'll change. That's a terrible outlook, isn't it? Mm.
The only thing I can do now is treat it lightly.
Yes.
It arises, it passes.
Yep. So it's almost advice. Well, it is advice, I guess, to say no matter what it is, no matter what's there, if you if the thought arises to remember to hold it lightly, then that's your best for everything. Nothing is worth clutching it hard. It just squeezes through your fingers if you do that. And that lightness, if that's a genuine experience of lightness, that changes things too. It's like seeing. It's such a big deal to just simply be aware of what is actual. Changes everything. Seeing makes all the difference. But we can never be sure what we see. We think we know, so hold it lightly. I love that. Hold it lightly.
Yeah, I think that's really an important point in a lot of things related to what we're doing here is I found that holding on to a viewpoint too tightly reinforces the sense of self
Absolutely. Yeah.
because you're yeah, it becomes your viewpoint against all others.
Yep. And a good reminder is everything's always changing. Nothing stays the same.
I sometimes find myself in I like to discuss or talk about different topics related to this on social media. That seems to be something I enjoy to do. But I also catch myself arguing a point of view, even when I still know what I just said. So I'm kind of trapped in the energy of selfing. When I do that, I expose myself to selfing. So I think I suspect this is a process here of me decon or reconditioning my relationship with social media, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't really remember when that was, but like maybe 2 years ago, I deleted my Facebook and Instagram account, and it was really an issue because I saved all my photos of the time of the years I spent in Argentina only on Facebook and Instagram. But then it was kind of an excuse, like, I can't delete my account because then, and actually I'd use it like a photo album or something like that. But then yeah, when I looked at it in a more honest way, then it was, of course, I mean, if it's a photo album, why do I post it on the internet and why do people give it a like, you know? I mean, if it was really just for me to have a recollection, then yeah, of course, it's somehow because we are all dopamine addicts and if we get when we get a like from somebody it's like slot machine the three cherries or something like that, so I mean there's nothing so bad with it, but I remember that I it was really like a habit that turned into an addiction and I just wanted to get rid of it. And the thing is that when I, yeah, also I think another excuse was, okay, but I'm living on a different continent than my friends in Germany. so at least they can see a bit, or I can see what they are doing and so
Another
on.
excuse, yeah.
And then, for example, like 1 year after I deleted my Facebook account, an old friend of mine, I lived together with her in Moscow, but she moved to Mexico City, and I didn't hear from her for a very long time, but she somehow, via Facebook, contacted a friend of mine to find out my telephone number. And then I thought, like, yeah, that's like the proof. If people really want to stay in touch with me, there is always an option to find my telephone number or my email address. So, um, yeah, but I think for a very long time I was really trapped in this thing, like those excuses why I can't delete my account. And it would have felt really like kind of a social suicide or something. But after I did it, I mean, nothing happened and I don't miss it at all. And it's like I'm more in contact with people now than when was still using it, because I think it rather, yeah, people rather don't get into contact with you on purpose because they think, ah, well, anyway, he's posting all his life all the time, so I see it every day and we are kind of in contact. So.
Good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some excuses. I do enjoy it, but I see also that it takes away from a lot of other experiences. So there's a judgment of what is most important.
I am really weird. I don't have social phone. I only have one
I
on Blue Sky to read jokes about current situations. I never post.
That reminds me actually, Vince. I was wondering if because we were talking about something in the chat that we were supposed to bring up in the group, and um, do you have a Facebook group or something that kind of ties the people that are here together?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a Facebook group called What is Enlightenment that
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
started for this group. Yeah, not very active, but
I kind of
Oh,
like
good.
the sense of community of the people that I meet here often, so it would be nice to have kind of a channel to keep in
hmm.
touch if one wanted to.
Yeah, I'll invite you to that group. Yeah.
I just joined it 2 days ago, so
Oh,
I
okay. No,
just
no
didn't
worries.
realize that it was tied to this. Yeah.
I'm not joining Facebook now.
No,
At this moment, no.
okay. Well, I'm thinking it's time to wind up. We're coming up for 3 hours. Again, thank you. Um, I can remember that we spoke about bringing something up at the group, but I can't remember what it was.
It was about the different levels of
Oh, yes. Yeah,
exploration,
I remember it now. Yeah, yeah, yep, yep. Yeah.
but we're
It is,
so
it,
few
it,
people
it
here.
is a bit of a trick that we're jumping back and forward, to at different levels, if you like, and it makes it a bit trickier. Especially if, as you say, especially when we like last group, there was a couple of people talking about their shifts, and so that can easily give people a wrong idea about what to expect, etc.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think to break up groups into levels might be not good at the moment. If
Yeah, I
there were
don't know
more
the
people,
answer.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know the answer to it.
if there was 15 or 20 people and we had a lot of one or the other, or they didn't were incompatible, then it'd be good. But yeah, so I see people wherever they are at, as good contributors to what other people might need, regardless of whether it's really advanced or not so advanced. Doesn't matter. Someone's
Yeah,
going to get something out of it.
I share that perspective as well. I think the point came up when it was something you brought up that you had noticed a decline in people showing up. And
Mm,
then I was just contemplating the reason for that. What could
yeah,
be the
yeah.
reason? And then maybe it just like they're not that's not their focus what we're discussing in the
Could
group.
could
And I
be,
also
could
saw
be. Yeah.
I think I saw somebody comment on a post or a comment that you had recently that actually pointed that out, that they're missing some kind of exercises for deeper stages. If you, I don't like calling it deeper stages, but I don't have any
Yeah,
other way
yeah,
to
I know what you
explain
mean. Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So that was a possible reason. But
Mm.
I agree with you. Like it doesn't feel right either to break it up. So I don't know the reason, the right answer.
No, yeah. And
But
I'm not concerned about dwindling numbers. I mean, I don't know. I can't have any idea as to why people do if they don't tell me. I've got no idea about what's going on for them. And I'm really happy to do a group of one. I mean, that's a different experience. That's great. That can be really deep. Uh, Whereas if there's a group of 15, then it's really a bit of a race to get around everybody before we run out of time. Uh, yeah, I don't mind either which way. I'm happy. If I'm here by myself, I'm happy to meditate.
Mm.
Mm.
Uh, uh, yeah. Were you gonna say something, Leonard?
no, I was just wondering, like, well, this is just, yeah, I mean, if people were commenting on advanced stages or something, maybe it could be that some people still have this kind of goal-oriented idea, or that it's like something linear leading up to some advanced stage, and um, maybe the reality is that many subjects repeat as well because you have to, I mean, because of our condition, we have to talk about it over and over again, and it's kind of like, yeah, a very long and not so linear process, and maybe that's like not what some of the people expected. I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what he was or what the reason why he pointed that out, but if I were to just share my own experience of this or motivation or for like if I have a new something shifts in me that I've not experienced and that I maybe not quite understand, uh, it feels good to kind of bring it up and discuss it and kind of get it more integrated um, by listening to others' perspective on it, right? But the risk of doing that, as Vince point out, is when I bring that up in a meeting where people still not even seen through the self, then it sets up expectations of, or possibly sets up expectation of what they're looking for to happen. And so they can be stuck in doubt forever. So this is just a reason for
But
the
it
topic.
doesn't have to be, I mean, it could also be positive. I mean,
Obviously, yes. Yeah, totally.
and I remember actually that in the beginning that used to happen to me that yeah, I felt like, oh, there is someone more advanced than me or something. And that
Mhm.
was kind of triggering this selfing. But then to get aware of it not being a competition or something that I have to be good at was also a very interesting or very important aspect to learn. So I guess even if it sets expectations or competition or something like that, to look into that is also very important. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, it's clear that there I have a story that I need to be mindful of others' experiences, which maybe or which I don't. It's not my
yeah, I just
responsibility.
noticed, for example, that yeah, it's difficult for me to for example, when you are talking about your experiences, I mean, all of you, um, I'm not so likely to take the role of somebody who is asking questions in order to point the person to something because I still have this feeling like, who am I to tell anybody about him or her, you know? So it's like I
But that
just
is
wanted,
also just a story, right?
yeah,
Isn't
I
it?
just wanted to say that because otherwise, I mean, okay, now I'm thinking about what you could think about me, so this is helping as well. But sometimes I think maybe people have the impression that I don't care about their experiences. It's just like that I am very careful to tell anybody, yeah, about what they should do or not do. Yeah, no, that's not the thing anyway, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So that's a hard one to get across to people that the most value you can be for yourself and for others in the group is to keep your descriptions about your experience.
Yeah.
And then sharing that is so amazingly helpful for other people who will identify and take note of where you've gone with that or what your attitude is towards that and so on. So this is also conditioning what we're doing here. This is but we have a different peer group. We have different conditioning. We're deconditioning a lot of the old stuff and reconditioning it into new stuff and just generally playing with the whole thing.
Yeah, actually, back in Buenos Aires, I went to a Buddhist group for a while, And yeah, then, I mean, after a while, there were a lot of things that I didn't really like. I mean, those kind of group mechanisms and things like that. But one thing I really enjoyed was that in the end, there was always a round where people practiced yeah, it was called like listening meditation, like to listen to other people. And the rule was like not to comment on what people said. I mean, at least not directly. So everybody could speak from their own point of view. And of course, maybe the first person talked about a subject and then that inspired the other person to also talk about something similar. But it would never have been like someone gives advice to someone. So I found that quite good. I enjoyed that.
Mm.
I think what I'm taking away from this last part is uh, I see how I am limiting myself by, or limiting my expression by thinking about uh, what possible expectations I would be setting up for others. So I'm just going to keep talking and sharing my experience.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
All right,
thanks.
well, let's end it there, eh? Have another go at that. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, bye.